Yes, welcome back after the break, everybody. Still have a few more sessions to go. Laura and I are going to be chatting all about tech assessments. So I'm Emma. I'm Chief of Staff at 101 Ways, a tech consultancy. My background is coaching, transformation, technology. Laura, do you want to just do a quick intro as well?
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Emma. I'm Laura Tacho. I'm a VP of engineering and an engineering leadership coach. My background is mostly in infrastructure and DevOps, developer tools. Recently, I've been working kind of outside of the developer tool space to get a bit more experience across lots of different sectors. And it's been interesting and eye-opening to see how many common problems fintech, health tech, ed tech, developer tools, all these different companies across different sectors have when it comes to hiring engineers.
Awesome. So yes, the session today is about tech assessments. Do ask any questions you like as we go, pop them in and I'll have a look at them as we go and just feed them in. And I guess I want to start with why we do tech tests. I hear an awful lot of groups whenever we get people together and start to chat. One of the main questions that comes out is, well, are we still doing them? Does it what we get out of them? I hear some people aren't doing them at all. So yeah, what's your thoughts on that? Why are we doing tests? Are they important still?
Yeah, it's such a wonderful question to start with, especially in the hiring market as it is right now. So I did an interesting poll on Twitter last week where I asked if a candidate completely gives code that doesn't compile or doesn't run in a technical assessment, can they still pass? And I was actually surprised that I think it was about 75% of people said, yeah, of course, because we're not really assessing whether the code compiles. In a technical assessment, what we're looking for is patterns of thinking, technical trade-offs, architecture, design patterns, those kinds of things. How the person communicates, do they Google? Can they use Stack Overflow appropriately? Those kinds of questions. So it's more about putting the person into a situation that is as close to real life as possible so that they can get a sense of what it's like to work with you and you can get a sense of what it's like to work with them.
Cool. Okay. I know when we do tech tests when we're hiring for it's not about the tech. It's about the how did they approach that challenge? What do they like to pair with? But I guess does that lend itself then remote versus in person and how you do those tests and how you execute those tests then? What difference does that make in how you plan it and execute it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different styles of technical assessments. So if you, some people in this audience, I'm sure, have never done one because it is common for some companies to just completely skip it because you can look at someone's resume or perhaps a referral or a recommendation from someone, and that counts enough. But for those of you that have done a technical assessment, you've probably had one of these flavors of technical assessment. There is the whiteboarding interview that gets a lot of public dunking because it's all about algorithms and not really about, you know, building software. Very few jobs have you invert a binary tree as part of your daily life. That's one style. We have the in-person interview, which is sometimes a pairing session, or sometimes it can be here's a problem, you have an hour in this room, go and do it and come back to us with an answer. And then we have a take-home assessment, which can last anywhere between maybe just an hour to you might have a couple days to do the assessment. Adding remote in kind of changes the experience for the candidate and the interviewer, quite honestly, a little bit. So with a pairing session, you're going to be on a shared terminal, over Zoom or some other tool in the background versus sitting next to each other. But those are kind of the main categories of technical assessments that companies like to use.
Okay. And do you have a preference? I know, in fact, it leads into one of the questions that's already come in from Jeff says about the balance between asking candidates to do an async test screen early in the process, like part of an initial phone screen. I guess that's taking things away and doing a way test and filtering out versus looking for that more of that pairing and that bouncing and that communication style. And I know when we were chatting before, there's that view of actually does it lend itself to filtering out some of that bias as well if it's anonymized and offline? So what are the pros and cons of some of that then?
Yeah, this is a big question to unpack. So let's start with the time actually in the interview sequence that the assessment comes with. So you asked me for what's my preferred What's my preferred assessment? And I am a big fan of take-home exams, but very specifically, I'm a fan of take-home exams after you have done a synchronous technical discussion interview stage. So you have to look at the technical assessment just not just in terms of its standalone, but you have to look at it of what other pieces of technical information are you getting from the candidate at the time they receive the technical assessment. So if I were to give a take-home exam to someone as their very first interaction with me, if I'm trying to hire them for my team and I say, hey, please go do this 4-hour take-home exam, they're going to look at me and be like, are you nuts? I mean, this is so disrespectful for my time is generally what the candidate is going to think, because you're asking a whole lot from them without giving them any indication of what is in it for them, what they're getting in return. So I find that giving the candidate a bit of time to have a discussion with the team, understand the tech stack, understand what's important, actually helps them perform better, more like real life on the technical assessment, on that take-home assessment when it comes to them later in the interview. That leads me into this question that you asked about bias, and can a technical interview remove bias from the process? So there are a lot of tools that say, no, you should start with a screening, with a technical assessment screening, maybe not a full take-home test, but maybe it's a coding challenge in order for the person to even enter the interview process. Bias comes in many different ways, shapes, and forms in your interview process. Evaluation and a technical assessment is just one of them. So all of these tools that promise that we can remove bias by giving you an anonymous technical screening, they're just lying to you, because there is, assessment of technical coding exercises is just one part where bias comes in. So you have to look at it holistically. It can help reduce it, but eliminate it, that won't happen just from one tool. So sorry to all the people who have been maybe have bought into those marketing promises, but they are just marketing promises. It's just one thing. It's not everything.
Actually, there's another question on it as well from the audience, from Joe. It's on about the balance. It says, how do you balance accessibility in its various with technical assessments, i.e. take home implies that they've got time and they've got the tech and the facilities to go and do that, versus in person, maybe in person is not so friendly to neurodiversity and things like that. So yeah, there's what are you actually asking of people? Like you gave the example of a 4-hour test, maybe is not what you want to kick off, but how do you go about designing a good test then for candidates?
Yeah, that's such a great point about, just by the structure of the interview step itself, you might be including or excluding certain people. And that's exactly what I'm, the heart of what I'm trying to get at when I say that an anonymous coding test can't remove bias completely, because simply by including certain interview stages, we're adding bias. So a person that can complete a 4-hour take-home exam most likely doesn't have caregiving responsibilities, or they have enough support that they can have someone take care of their children or their aging parents. They have a development machine at home that they can use outside of work hours. They are not in school, they have free time to do it. So when I think about how much I want to ask of someone, I think 2 hours is really the maximum that you can go in an interview stage without getting to the point where either the candidate feels like they're doing unpaid work for you, in which case the solution is simply pay them. And some companies do that. Instead of a technical interview, they might just have a project and pay the candidate to complete this project. And then at the end of the project say, you know what, this was great, we want to hire you. Or they say, here's your money, we're not going to move forward with you. And it's a bit of maybe a fairer way in some people's opinions to do that assessment.
What about the overhead of doing that, I guess, internally as well? Because depending on where you do it in the process, the interesting stats and things that we had earlier about, how wide that funnel has to be at the start of it. It could get quite an overhead for your people as well, if it's pairing, if it's reviewing, it's just that internal overhead. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it can be very heavy organizationally, logistically, quite a heavy lift. So there are some ways to do this for you. You can certainly orchestrate a lot of it. You can have standard GitHub repos and some standardized things internally to make it really that the heavy lift that you have to do is organizing the time with the candidates and then organizing the time for reviews. The other way is using a tool. There's one that I really like to use called Code Submit. They don't pay me, maybe they should, but I use it for not only orchestrating, but they also now have like a pairing functionality in their tool. So instead of leaving it up to the candidate and leaving it up to your interview panel to figure out like, okay, what's the tooling? What are we going to use? You just give them a link and it's really easy. It saves a ton of time. So as remote becomes more prevalent and we start getting a bit more educated about what technical assessments work and which ones don't, you should expect to see more tools like Code Submit come on the market that can help orchestrate the technical assessment part of your interview process.
This is usually the point where I expect to see the chat window going mad with everyone recommending the tools that they're using as well.
Yeah, there's surprisingly not a ton, like there's not a ton that do that packaged start to finish experience that's great for the candidate, which is really important, but also great for the reviewer.
Another interesting question we've had in is, I guess, around the balance of technical interview versus cultural fit. So this is from Ed. It says, what's a reasonable proportion of tech interview versus cultural fit? 50-50 is a question. Is it the same for more highly specialized roles as well, as in you're looking at architecture or leadership or particular technology, or how do you balance out the skills that you need?
Yeah, this is a really thoughtful question. And serendipitously, I was just talking to one of my coaching clients about this morning. So I have a very fresh answer. And this is how I explained it to them. We know about the T-shaped developer, where we have the general skills on top, and then we have the T that goes deep into one thing. When I'm looking for a candidate and trying to assess if they're going to fit into my organization, that T part is not just their general technical skills, but it's general professional skills. So, I think that there's some companies in the past, or maybe there's room to say, well, this person has a really specialized skill set, so they're not very good at communication, they're not very nice to work with, they alienate people, but we need to overlook that because they go really deep into this very specific skill set. I think that's a very unhealthy attitude to take, and that is going to be damaging to the team that you are trying to build. So instead, when I think about that T-shaped developer in that generalist skill set, there's non-negotiables in there about, I wouldn't say culture fit, but culture add. And I think Jesse is going to talk about that in the session just after this one, about how you create a great engineering culture and how you can hire for it. But those things are non-negotiable for me. And then the generalist skill or the technical skills add on top of it. I've found in my career, and I've interviewed, probably over 500, maybe close to 750 candidates at this point. In the last couple of years, that the technical skills are always the easiest ones to teach. And it's those cultural skills, communication, product thinking, those are really difficult to teach. So if I'm going to bring someone into my org with any skill gap, I want to make sure it's the skill gap that's easier to teach and easier for them to acquire.
And presumably then that's what you're testing for. So how easy is it to design a test? Or do you recommend that people are designing their tests, or are they like using a tool to go do that for them? If you're not testing, if somebody knows the particular code to solve this problem, you're testing for how they solve a problem. How do you get people to assess that and to really know what they're looking for?
Yeah, this is where that bit of art and science comes in, and I think was it Luca or in a previous session mentioned that it's amazing how much smart people can learn. So if you're looking for someone with a lot of experience or someone who's very smart and is very adaptable, you're probably going to have better luck finding that person that's very smart and very adaptable and can acquire those skills quickly and is interested in learning. I see technical assessment as it's not everything. It's just one piece of that whole hiring arc as we're talking about today. So it's really important to understand what signals you're getting from other parts of the process, and then where the technical assessment fits in, what gaps are being filled by that technical assessment, and then what questions are still left unanswered that you need to find an answer for somewhere else.
Interesting. We are just about out of time. I've posted a couple of links into the chat as we've been speaking, which is so one of the blogs that Laura has written around eliminating bias in your tech interviewing. Is there anything else, Laura, you want to wrap up on? If someone's just starting and it feels like it's going to be a massive overhead and they don't really know where to go and how to frame up what this interview process is doing for them right now and what tech tests are adding, where should they go? Where should they start?
Yeah, I think one place that you can start is go to my website, laurataco.com. Last summer, I interviewed about 15 engineering leaders, specifically about hiring and building diverse teams. And I wrote a very lengthy blog series about all the different steps and everything that goes into it. It's on the bottom of my homepage. So go there. You can also subscribe to my newsletter. I do write quite a lot about hiring, about measuring performance, developer productivity, performance management, all of this stuff that's related to building a high performing team. So check it out. I'd love to see you there.